Bonjour tout le monde. Hello, thanks for being here. My name is Melanie. I'm the executive director at the Ottawa Music Industry Coalition. Je suis la directrice générale de la Coalition de l'industrie de la musique d'Ottawa. This is a really important session today. Ça va se passer en anglais, sauf Cindy, elle parle français aussi. Alors, s'il y a quelqu'un qui est plus confortable en français, vous pouvez certainement demander vos questions en français et on peut absolument vous parler en français. Alors, voilà. I am going to stop sharing my audio. Thank you very much. There it is. Um, Thanks so much for being here today. This is the reason why we wanted to do these workshops, and there's a series of three. This is the second one. There's one more. They're all available on demand, ottawamike.com/FMO. And it's a partnership with Folk Music Ontario, an organization that holds a conference every year that is near and dear to my heart, Shauna's, Chris's, Cindy's, a lot of us are Carolyn, a lot of Folk Music Ontario alumni, if you will. I started going to Folk Music Ontario conferences when they were called OCFF, the Ontario Council of Folk Festivals, in 2011. And lots of people here have been going even longer than me. And it's a really beautiful community that we're part of. And I feel really lucky that even though I've played music in French, I've played some rock music, I've done some country, the folk community is really where my heart is. And it's really the community that raised me. So I'm super grateful to them and to our entire community. And this was a way for Mike to be involved in giving back to that community, in putting Ottawa on the map in terms of professional development and being involved. And it's a way for us also to gather where we can see each other on Zoom before the conference and possibly make some connections here so that anybody who's going to the conference for the first time doesn't feel alone. I know that when I went to the conference for the first time, I thought everybody knows each other, everybody's hugging. I feel like an outsider. And I know that so many people here would tell you the same thing. They all felt that way too. And by the end of the conference, it's guaranteed that you're giving hugs on the way out as well. So everyone here, I guarantee you, is open to making connections with folks and talking offline even before the conference again. So if there's anyone who's asking interesting questions, if there's anyone that you find that you want to connect with afterwards, reach out to me and we'll make those connections for you. This is a way for us to like see each other in this room so that when we get to the conference, we can be like, hey, Mitch, how's it going? Like, really like your question on whatever. So yeah, it's a way for us to connect. So thanks for being here. Big shout out to Ontario Creates for funding this project. Also a big shout out to the City of Ottawa, who are our largest funder. So if you're not sure about OMIC, the Ontario Music Industry Coalition, we're largely funded by the City of Ottawa. We're a nonprofit organization. You can view us as Ottawa's music office at an arm's length. And so we get our operational funding from the City of Ottawa, but we're also allowed to go out and get private and public funds for individual projects, different activities. And so this one is gratefully funded by Ontario Creates and in partnership with Folk Music Ontario. We do a lot of advocacy. Obviously, right now it's a municipal election, so it's very important for us to be the voice of music in Ottawa. We also do a lot of programming, and that's probably the most forward-facing thing that you see with Mike. We had a concert series this summer that lasted 3 months with like 3 festivals in one, really, called City Sounds, where we had almost 80 artists play in different areas outside, on the street, setting up tents, setting up sound systems, and really trying to embed music into the fabric of Ottawa. And so that's our mandate. And we're here to support artists, music workers, fans, anyone who wants to support a sector that's been really hard hit. It's been really difficult for artists. It's been really difficult for sound folks. It's been really difficult for venues. throughout the pandemic. And so here we are in a very unique position right now to be able to build something better that is more supportive, that is less hierarchical, that is less colonial, and empowering people around us. So that's our mission. We're really glad you're here. Cindy is going to take over in just a couple of minutes. She is one of my best friends, has been with me through the OCFF FMO journey. We've run showcase rooms together under the Ladies in Waiting Collective. We talk a lot about mental health when it's just her and I having a chat. She is my greatest confidant and is a really beautiful human being. And I know you will feel instantly connected to her as well. She has a lot of really great tips and tricks and knowledge. I think knowledge is the most important part about the physiology of what happens when we're stressed out. And of course, this is a really great time to do this because a lot of us have not peopled or conferenced in a couple of years. And so I think everyone's going to get something out of this. I know I always do when I talk to Cindy. So I'm going to hand it over to her to take over, and then we'll have a 15-minute question period at the end.
Thanks, Mel. Hi, everybody. It's such a pleasure to be here. And I just want to say, first of all, thank you to Mel and to Omike and everyone involved in just bringing these conversations, giving us a template to have these conversations. I think that especially coming out of COVID, I mean, I think we are a society that we react to uncertainty. We live in anticipatory stress, right? We are managing a lot. So the goal today, I just want to demystify a little bit kind of what's happening in the body when we are trying to navigate through a stress response. So, and I am going to pull up a slideshow just for, I know a lot of people are visual learners, so we're going to do that momentarily, but yeah, just really demystifying it. And before I do that, I just want to really highlight the fact that we are all so unique in our processes, but then we have these fundamental mechanisms and wiring that really bring us at this, like we are all working with the similar functions that of course have been wired differently based on our habitual ways. But I just really want to highlight how unique everyone's way of navigating and our emotional go-to homes are based on our individual experiences. So essentially with regulation, we're not trying to deal with the external things that are triggering. It's like the storm is going to pass. We're trying to anchor the boat, so that when the storm passes, we have a few of those tools to kind of really anchor us through that process. So I'm just going to share my screen. We're going to start by just talking about what's happening in the body when, can everybody see that? Yeah, okay. So before we get started, I just want to acknowledge, I know we're all kind of coming in from different places. So I am situated in Treaty 9 territory, and I'm grateful to be a guest on the traditional territory of Ojibwe, Chippewa, Cree, Algonquin, and Métis peoples. And here we go. So these three images, so to the left, we're going to kind of talk about this threat detector, the amygdala, the stress response. So what happens once that alarm system gets triggered? And then to the right here, the vagal nerve. So the vagal nerve is the longest, arguably the longest nerve that runs all the way from the stem of your brain, and it goes all the way down to your digestive system into your pelvis. And this is your highway of emotional response. So this is the nerve that is responsible for the autonomic nervous system, which is what is navigating these stress responses. So again, you don't need to remember all these terms if if you are interested in any of them. There's so much information on all of these things. So just to start off, I want us to think about, first of all, that safe place, that homeostasis. So what does that look and feel like for you, right? When we're in a state of feeling safe, feeling secure, feeling comfortable, we're wired for connection. That is where we can see the big picture. Your prefrontal cortex, your main station is accessible, right? So this is where we want to be, especially when we are trying to make those connections. So again, this term homeostasis. And when we go to the polyvagal, like the vagal nerve, this is the top of the ladder. Okay. So when we're trying to regulate, this is where we're trying to come home to. We're trying to get back to this place. So just a few terms like the amygdala. So that's our our alarm system or threat detector. So we're going to talk a little bit about that after. And then again, so looking at this image to the left of this poor zebra. Okay, so the way the stress response is designed is that when the amygdala detects a threat, when our perception of our environment is, okay, this surpasses my ability to cope with this, or this anticipatory stress that we feel of like, oh, I can't do that, or whatever the trigger is, your body goes into this stress response that is designed to get you to a safe place. So the zebra, what is happening? So the threat detector goes, okay, we got to run for our lives. Prefrontal cortex, offline, no longer accessible. Your digestive system, offline. Your immune system, offline. Reproductive system, offline. None of these things are going to serve you in this let's get out of here situation, right? So what is happening instead is your amygdala sends the signal that we're in danger, and then the endocrine system and the adrenaline glands start to shoot adrenaline all over your body. And then you end up with this chemical soup of stress hormones designed to get you out of there. It's that mobility, it's that sense of like, oh, that energy underneath your skin, and all the blood flow is racing to your limbs so that you can run and get out of there, which is amazing if you're being chased by a lion or a tiger. But what if you're at an FMO conference, right? So none of these things serve us in those moments. So it's like this real amazing system designed to keep us safe, but it's also one of our most primitive systems. It's from the reptilian time. So it's like knowing physiologically that is what is happening in your body in a situation when your life is not under threat. Like if you are in a real situation of danger and you got to run and get out of there, then how amazing that your body is designed to really give you that surge of energy so that you can run and get out of there. But if you're at an FMO conference and you're being triggered and your body starts to respond in this way, so what do we do, right? So just moving forward here. So again, the amygdala, a great example is, imagine that you're driving and you're having a chat with a friend and you're relaxed, you're comfortable, and then all of a sudden somebody cuts you off. And without even thinking about it, you swerve out of the way, you get out of dangers, you're fine, you're safe. And depending on the type of person you are, maybe you can just keep driving, take a few breaths, and then eventually you get back into that place of calm, safety, homeostasis. For others, maybe that's a little bit more triggering for you. Maybe there has been an accident in your past. So it could be a bit more of a reaction. And maybe you need to pull over, take a few breaths. And so we all are going to have different triggering effects based on that situation. But that surge of energy, that quick response, that's your body having that chemical adrenaline soup that's able to create that knee-jerk reaction. And so your amygdala, your threat detector, you just got to picture this like scanning siren that is happening involuntarily. It's just always scanning, right? So another thing to kind of think about knowing this is, how do you orient in the world? You know, if you're somebody that's hyper vigilant, when you walk into a room, are you looking for exits? Are you looking for threatening situations? Or do you feel safe? Are you looking at the art on the wall? Are you looking at, who do I know? Who can I connect with? So starting to be curious about how you orient in the world can just be a first step to getting to know your autonomic nervous system, because this is what we want to do. We want to kind of understand where we're at, what kind of habitual responses we've developed over the years, and to create new neural pathways that will become accessible when we do feel triggered in these stress responses. So this is the key, is that we want to create these responses that help us regulate in these perceived moments of threat. So here we go with the vagal nerve. So like I said before, the vagal nerve runs all the way from the stem, your brain stem, all the way into your pelvic. So I really recommend, you can find so many podcasts on the Polyvagal Theory. That's Stephen Porges is the theorist, and I wish we all learned this in high school, and I hope, and I know they're fighting to integrate it into education, because it's such an empowering tool for just understanding what's happening in your body. So earlier I was talking about, you know, the homeostasis. So in your nervous system, when you're at the top of the ladder, so let's see this ladder sort of like running parallel to this nerve. So the top of the ladder being that, it's called ventral vagal, but that's that safe place. That's that place where if you see a child, a baby, connecting with its caregiver, that eye to eye contact connection, we are wired for connection when we are in that state. We feel safe. Our eyes are able to remain connected. So eye contact, even our ears, our hearing is open to the frequencies of the human language, our throat, all of this. So let's say you are triggered. So we have these different habitual reactions to stress, and maybe you'll identify to one or two or a combination. So it's not this way or that way, it can change. And we all kind of go from each one of these states. So if you're in this happy situation and then you're triggered, some people kind of their go-to is that state of anxiety, that's sympathetic. So here's the middle of the ladder. So when you go into that sympathetic, that's what we were talking about earlier, that mobility, that adrenaline chemical soup, that getting chased by the lion in the forest. So that's what's happening physiologically. So what happens, oh, sorry, I'm realizing there's a typo. It's sympathetic with an M. But yeah, so what happens when you're in that sympathetic aroused, that hyper arousal state, is you can no longer have eye contact. You're, like I said earlier, that prefrontal cortex connection is offline. So you're really not functioning in this big picture way where you really can make sense of the world around you. It becomes a bit of this tunnel vision, chaos, not feeling safe, and you lose a portion of your hearing. So you're no longer even receptive to the information that's coming at you. So it's really not a state of high function. So, and we're going to talk about how to get back up that ladder. But before, I want to talk about this poor little bonhomme at the bottom of the ladder. So this next state, which is referred to as dorsal vagal. So this bottom of the ladder. So for some people, they get to that hyper arousal until there's a collapse. So it's not sustainable there. And at a certain point, there's a collapse. For some people, they go directly to that state of collapse. And what that looks like is manifests in depression, feeling numb, dissociation, feeling like, what's the point? That real state of disconnect. An image that is often used to talk about dorsal vagal, it's essentially the mind checks out completely because it can't handle. It just checks out. So the mouse that's playing dead, once it's been caught by the cat, so the mouse in the cat's mouth, and the mouse that just plays dead, that's that dorsal vagal state. And that's a state of survival as well. Like if people are experiencing highly traumatic events, your mind may check out to survive that moment. So again, there is a function to each one of these states. And when your body is finding itself anywhere in this cycle, I just think it's important to know that your body is functioning exactly like it is designed to. I think it's important to know that, like, you're not broken. This is exactly how your body is wired to keep you safe. However, the perception of threat perhaps has been amplified from previous experiences. So for anyone who has experienced a lot of trauma, there's these cycles that can happen. So a normal cycle, kind of what we were talking about earlier, the driving example, a reaction, a stress response is created. So an emotion is felt, however that manifests in your body, and then it's sustained, it grows, and then eventually it decays and it resolves, right? And then you find your way back to that homeostasis. But for a lot of us, if we're in a state of trauma, or if we've experienced these states of hyperarousal and that cycle wasn't completed, we could also get stuck. And that's why for people who experience triggers, it's that cycle being relived and it never really is given the space to come to that completion. So just really important things to keep in mind. Just a quick recap is that each one of these states can coexist and they're so normal. And we may have the tendency to end up in one state more than the other. But all of these states are normal. They're part of our system. So how can we then work with that? Okay. So moving forward here. So just a little bit more on the polyvagal theory. Again, I really recommend, there's a woman, Deb Dana, that talks about this in podcasts. So even on your drive over, it's just really accessible. It's a really great way of understanding what's happening in the autonomic nervous system. So again, when you're at the top of the ladder, it's that's where we want to be. That's where we want to make our way back to. So that wired for connection, safety, rest and digest, homeostasis. So then the sympathetic is that hyper arousal, again, that being triggered. And then you kind of go down to the middle of the ladder when it comes to the vagal nerve. So then there's that perceived threat, that whole chemical soup of cortisol, adrenaline, that increased heart rate, high blood pressure, that fight or flight. Some people turn to fawn. Fawning is, people pleasing as a way of getting out of a situation. And then again, everything is offline. And then that bottom of the ladder being dorsal vagal. So the mouth's playing dead, that dissociative, depressed, collapsed state, shut down, the mind checks out. So completely offline there. So those are the three states. So in a situation, I'm just going to skip to this next one. So just a few tips and tricks. So in a situation where you start to experience any kind of stress response. So I just put a few things here that can really help, but it really depends on where you are in your body. So on the second page, I talk about observing and interoception. So in somatics and that kind of thing, by creating this sense of curiosity with the felt senses, by being able to just be curious about it, even like if you're feeling anxiety, just something as simple as placing your hand on your heart and being able to notice like, oh, okay, my heart rate has increased. I feel anxious, like just naming it and being able to give yourself that moment of curiosity creates those first few steps up the ladder, because you're engaging the prefrontal cortex. So just by adding a step of observation, of curiosity, naming it, giving it space. Earlier I was talking about these broken cycles and then you get stuck. So the body, how do we feel emotions? How do we know we're upset? The body tells us, right? If you feel heartbroken, that sense of your heart sinks, maybe there's that tension in the chest or that sick feeling to the stomach. So the body and the brain, they communicate. So if the brain is saying, oh, I'm heartbroken, that vagal nerve sends a message down to the all the way to the pelvis. And that sick feeling in your stomach that you feel is then the vagal nerve accentuating that message back to the brain, right? So it's cyclical. So people who do like cognitive behavioral therapy, they try to like shift and reframe with the thoughts. People that do somatic healings, they try to change and reframe with the body, because the thought sends a message, the body reinforces it. So whichever approach you're taking, you want to break the cycle and kind of create these ways of getting back online. Not literally, but here we are talking this post-COVID. So lots of stuff here. So of course I'm going to highlight breathing. So the breath is something that we involuntarily do day in, day out. But what's amazing about the breath is that it's something you can then voluntarily start to use as a way to regulate. So something as simple as taking 3 deep breaths, having your hand on your heart, will right away, if you are in that hyper arousal, will right away help you up that ladder back into that homeostasis. So co-regulation. So we are wired for connections. If you think about moments that were the hardest to navigate through, the impact of having someone to talk to, the impact of being able to just kind of share in whatever way really helps us get back up that ladder. So there's lots of grounding techniques we can talk about. For some people, it could be as simple as I, for one, use essential oil. So I always have this little bottle with different oils, and I've been carrying this in my purse for 15 years. And it's one of these things where I don't control any external factors, but at any point in my day, I know that I can spray my little bottle and at least this one thing I can control, right? So uncertainty is a real trigger for anxiety. And with COVID, we've all had to face this reality of ongoing uncertainty. So creating these little, having these little tools in our back pocket that you can count on. And I mean, some people, you don't want to create these crutches, or some people would say that you're just creating this something to lean on. But having these techniques, having these tools accessible to you, is just a game changer going into a situation. Self-care buddy, having teammates. So choosing before, if you know a few people that are going to the conference, reaching out to somebody and saying, hey, do you want to be my self-care buddy, where you can just send each other text messages in the morning or at night, or have like a check-in or a check-out, just to have somebody with that sense of like, hey, we're in this together, let's check up on each other throughout the conference, can be really helpful. So for people who tend to go to that place of dissociation or numbness, using tricks to really bring you back into your body is really helpful. So having a cold shower is amazing. If there's that tendency to feel dissociative or numb, and that like shaking it out, getting that energy going. So if you look or think about that ladder, when you're in that place of numbness, you have to make your way back up that ladder. And the only way up that ladder is through that mobility, that sympathetic, that hyper arousal. So for someone who tends to go to that place of feeling numb, you have to incorporate this movement. Dancing is amazing. Exercise is amazing. Just something that can create that energy so that you can make your way back up that ladder, up to that ventral vagal. So I have a few exercises that I would love to do with everyone. So I'm just going to get out of it here for now. So let me just stop sharing. So one thing that I feel is really helpful as we navigate through what can be really stressful is having access to images of safety and of ourselves, as of our authentic selves as we want to be. So one exercise that I would love to do with everyone is, I feel like everyone's kind of seated. So maybe you can just kind of sit comfortably. I invite you to close your eyes. You could turn your screen off if that feels more comfortable. And I just want everyone to think of a time in the last week where you felt like your most authentic self. So a time where you felt like you can just be, you felt safe. And just thinking about that moment where you felt like your authentic self, really allowing that moment to come to life in your thoughts, in your mind, with the felt senses. So how did that moment feel? Were you laughing? Was there somebody there co-regulating with you? Were you in nature? Were you outside? Were there smells in the room? And just allowing this moment to come to life for you, and really seeing yourself in this image where you felt the most authentic. And the reason why I want you to think about this is sometimes when we go offline with these stress responses, we lose sight of where we are, where we want to be. So by allowing this moment of authenticity, and if it's a moment if there's not a moment that comes to mind, thinking of a moment, an image of yourself, or creating that can be really helpful. And it just helps us to connect to that authentic version of ourselves, which is rooted in that top of the ladder homeostasis place. And another one that I think can be really helpful is just for people who struggle with anxiety, having an image of safety. So again, taking the time to carve out that space. So if there's a place in your life, and maybe again, maybe it's an imaginary place, maybe it's you running in a field, maybe it comes with, or sitting in your grandma's lap, maybe it's being on a canoe in the middle of the water, middle of a lake. So having access to a calming place, a place where you feel safe, just as something you can have in your back pocket. And it could be something, for me, for a long time, I had an image of, when I was going through a difficult chapter, I had an image of these two birds flying over the ocean. And that was my daughter and I were flying over the ocean. So whenever I would get into this state of hyperarousal, I turned to this image just to counter the thought that may then take me down the ladder and spiral. So, and again, it's so different for everyone. We've all made it to this point here today. So thinking about things in the past, like asking yourself, how have I gotten through some of those hard times in the past? Was it by going for a walk? Was it by, strumming your guitar? I mean, as artists, I'm assuming a lot of us here are artists, having the coping skill of turning toward music and art as a way of processing and as a way of shifting. That's that cycle. So something comes up, it grows, you give it space. You give it space by looking at it, by writing about it, and then by allowing it to live, be present, and then eventually it decays and dissolves, and then you can integrate it and find meaning from it, right? So when you don't give space to these things that come up, then they can be really, they can be debilitating. They can rob you of your faculties. And it's like, how do you shift? So I can talk about this all day long. And there's so many things, tips and tricks that we can come up with. But I think looking, just because everybody is so unique, just before you head to the conference, thinking about things that have helped you in the past, things that come naturally to you, things that resonate with you, that help you cope in these moments. And it's having access to those things. So if you write them down when you are in a moment of stress, you're not going to go into that knee-jerk reaction, which is a reaction that's coming from your stress response, which is linked to this offline prefrontal cortex, right? So the premeditation is an important step because it just gives you easy access to these skills, to these coping skills, to these tools when you are in a place that's those things are not accessible. Mel, I see you saying yes.
Yeah, totally. There were so many interesting things in this presentation, Cindy. One thing that you and I have talked about a bunch, and I love that you mentioned how, like, when you're in that stress response, like those usual your digestive system, your immune system, all that stuff, like it is not accessible. It's not there. Like the pathway is like road closed, can't get there. And one thing that you had told me about once was like what physically happens when you take a deep breath when you're in a stressful moment. And I always thought people were just bullshitting about like, take 3 breaths, you know? And it's like, yeah, okay, calm yourself down. But when you told me, you said that it stops the cortisol from being, can you tell everybody about that? Because it's fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Well, so in yoga, we talk about the sympathetic, the parasympathetic, which is exactly all of this stuff we're talking about. So when the cortisol and everything is flowing through your body, taking those deep breaths that we've all been told to take our whole lives, and we're like, whatever, that's woo woo stuff, or like, and I feel that I've struggled with like eating mindfulness, but it actually scientifically takes you into that parasympathetic, which is that homeostasis that we're talking about, which is that top of the ladder. So every breath you take, it signals the brain to stop releasing adrenaline and cortisol. It's like it's telling the brain, hey, we're okay. You can stop this chemical soup. And eventually what happens is there's so much of these stress hormones that like you really do lose sight of that. Like, what do we do when we feel hurt or we feel stressed? We all stop breathing. We have this like a response, and your body needs to breathe through it. So there's an amazing, I'd like to do one more thing with everyone. It's super, you'll just feel it right away. I think everyone's muted, but it's in yoga, it's called the Brahmari breath. It's the humming bee. And we could just do three breaths, but essentially you're going to take a deep breath through the nose and try to like really do the belly breathing. And I always encourage people to picture like a hole in the lower back, this air hole. So you're breathing from that lower spine air hole. And as you take a deep breath, you're going to then block your ears. I invite you to block your ears and close your eyes if that feels safe and good for you. And you're creating that humming bee with the mouth, so mouth closed. And we're just going to take 3 breaths like that. So again, feel free. I'm going to mute my camera just so that you don't have to hear me do that. But just so you go through it. So you're taking a nice deep breath, blocking the ears if that feels safe. Invite you to close the eyes, and then slowly exhale with that and go ahead and just take 3 full breaths like that. And just noticing what 3 breaths does. So going into the felt senses, it really does, for me, that breath, it's almost like a vacuum cleaner comes into my brain and just kind of vacuums out all the stuff. That's my image, but it really does activate that parasympathetic, which right away tells your body, stop releasing cortisol, we're okay. And it's that maintenance, right? You have to kind of allow yourself to take those steps back up the ladder.
Let's normalize doing this stuff in public. You know what I mean? Like, I would love to just catch somebody in a bathroom doing that and join them. You know?
I know.
Like, how great would that be? The other day, I was setting up a tent with my friend, and she's been doing a lot of, mindfulness work. And we both got so frustrated at this tent that both at the same time, we just went, okay. And we both turned around, and I could hear her doing the same thing as I was, and just like taking deep breaths. And we just like looked away, and I'm like, normalize doing that in public spaces, or doing that with your friends, where you're just like, I need a minute right now. Like, I am the most important thing to me right now, and this is what I need to do. Tune out, do this. And I feel like just like doing that in public spaces. Not that it's going to be comfortable for everyone, but wouldn't it be great if at any time you just saw somebody taking 3 deep breaths in the corner, you'd be like, yeah, cool. Actually, I'm gonna join you in that, you know? I feel like we would start a
Absolutely.
revolution.
We should normalize it. And I agree with you. I was at a spa actually, and there's this other breath that is similar to what we were doing, but instead of the humming, you do like a VOO, like a VOO sound, which kind of stimulates the lower abdomen, which is amazing for the vagal nerve. And I was doing that in a steam room, and there was a woman that came in, and I was just like, I'm just going to keep doing this. And she began to cry, and she came up to me after, and she said, I don't know why, but that made me cry. And it was like, it was okay. It was just like, it's just this vibration that it's soothing. It's soothing. It helps. And the co-regulation, right? I think that another thing you can do just as a friend, or as you know, as we are all navigating as a community, as a society, when you see someone who is in that stress response, being aware that they are no longer functioning from that place of logic, and trying to get them back to that place of logic, just getting them to tell you how they feel and to locate it in the body, getting them to create that, to turn on that muscle of interoception, that mindfulness, that awareness of the felt senses, can be really, really helpful for someone who's in that stressful reaction. Like there's a client I work with that he carries a Jenga game around, and for him, when he gets really, really anxious, he pulls out his Jenga, because guess what? As soon as he pulls that out, he has to systematically, you know, put all the pieces together and it's like giving him, it's his route back to that part of the brain. So that's why it's just important, whatever works for you, whatever you can do, that's going to slowly get you back up that ladder, back to that functioning place, which is where we all want to be and deserve to be.
Mm, so good. Um, let's think if anybody has some questions for Cindy, prepare them, and we'll open up for a question period in just a minute. I do want to mention that Cindy is going to be on site at FMO with another qualifying psychotherapist named Jordan O'Connor, and they are running a wellness room. Cindy, do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so we will be doing running group discussions, sort of like a group therapy, um, through Friday and Saturday. So the schedule will be available. Everybody can kind of tune in, but it's also a space that we're collaboratively creating just as a safe place, somewhere to go to. There's going to be lots of books. And we'll also be on site for if anybody's ever in need of any support or anything like that. Our contacts will be available, and you could reach out to us. And I think that we are all navigating through, you know, a world of uncertainty, triggers, anxiety. So just creating a space where we can unpack that together safely. So yeah, come on by
Yeah.
anytime.
Do we know what room the wellness room is in yet?
We don't know,
Okay.
but it'll be indicated. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Just a note for everybody, if you weren't at the last session, FMO does not have an app this year. And so they're using the website as their app. So the schedule has been posted. So you can check out the FMO, folkmusicontario.org website. And then I'm sure they'll be posting about the wellness room as well. Another quick thing, that if you guys weren't tuned in last week, there are no posters this year at FMO, just so you know. So everything is paper free, and you can buy ads. All of that information is on the FMO website as well. So if you're like, you know, getting your papers printed and stuff, stop the press. Don't do that. But you can still have handbills and business cards for folks, but there will be no posters on the walls. So if you're looking for the wellness room poster, you're not going to see it, but you will see it on the FMO website. One really quick tip that Cindy told me a long time ago that I used a lot in workshops with students, I think is a really important workshop idea, or a tool that anyone can use, especially if you're performing at FMO this year. If you're feeling really anxious, a lot of times the energy is really in your head. So something you can do is a visualization of bringing energy into your feet and feeling your toes. This is something that I used to do on stage when I was nervous, when I was playing like a big show that I was nervous about. As soon as I got on stage, I would try to remember to. It becomes a habit as well. Sometimes you guys step on stage, and then and that's the first thing you think of, which then you know you're doing it right. You're getting the habit in the right way. But yeah, sending energy down to your feet and like feeling your toes and like taking a few deep breaths before you start performing can be really helpful. And it can be really helpful during the conference if you're just feeling anxious or you're about to have like a one-on-one meeting with someone that you think is really important and you're having imposter syndrome, because that's what we do. Sending energy to your toes and trying to feel it out that way is it can be helpful. That was a good Cindy trick that Cindy taught me a long time ago.
Visualizations are so powerful, and they, in the brain, the same thing, like if you're visualizing doing it, the same part of the brain activates as if you were actually physically doing it. So just knowing the power of that, and in fact, even for mental rehearsals, they are actually proven to even be sometimes more effective than actual physical. So just knowing the power of that brain body connection. And another thing to keep in mind, just give yourself permission to do what you need to do. I think that's a big one. I think sometimes we put ourselves in these places, and if you are feeling triggered or if you're in that stress, and I mean, you can't always just walk out off the stage and take that moment, but maybe just giving yourself that space, giving yourself permission to like go and care for yourself. I think that that's really important, because sometimes we just kind of plow through and we commit, and that kind of, another thing you were saying in the visualization that is really helpful is just that body communicating to the brain. If you think about shame or imposter syndrome, like if everyone can just like slouch your shoulders forward and like put your head down and just look down and just notice how that feels in your body, like that sense of shame that's embodied, and how you just automatically kind of feel that. And then as you inhale, coming up and sending those shoulders back, and just kind of like that triumph posture, and just
Power pose.
Yeah, and it's true though, that power pose communicates to your brain like, yeah, we're good, because these emotions, they do show up in the felt senses. So it's like, again, for some people, it's really in reframing the thought, so if you have this negative thought about yourself, having that counter thought in your back pocket, like I am enough, I am great, having those positive affirmations really then give the message from the brain to the body, but also that body kind of taking up that positive stance so that the body can give the message to the brain. So you really have lots of different tools that can really go from the top down, which is like the brain, versus bottom up, which is more like the body.
Yeah. Thanks, Cindy.
Mm-hmm.
Does anyone have questions for Cindy? Feel free to unmute yourself and jump in.
I have a question. It's
Yeah,
Chris.
go ahead, Chris.
Hey, Chris.
Hi. If you think about it, for anybody that's been to the conference, let's put it this way, who hasn't been to it before? Yeah, well, see, if you have, oh, Kareem, you haven't? It's one of the most, especially if you're an artist, I would say, it's one of the most stressful environments you could ever put yourself in. Do you guys agree that have been there?
Yeah,
And partly because of, Shauna, do you agree? Partly because of the expectations that you might be putting on yourself, and and not to mention the cost and just the nature of the event itself. It's very intense. It's an
yeah.
intense experience.
I agree, Chris, and we're actually addressing a lot of those, exactly everything you just said, in one of our discussion groups. So it'd be great if you want to stop in, because one thing with being an artist, it's super intense. It's high stress. The expectations are high. The financial gains are often really low, and the risks are really high. Like, even I think the gains are really in the connections and that community. But as far as like these tangible monetary gains, I mean, it's not really my experience with these conferences. So it's like, how do you navigate feeling like you're enough, like you're authentic, like you're all of these things in the music industry, when our careers rely on external acceptance, external validation, and then how are you enough without that external validation? But without that external validation, you might not get the gigs, or you might not get the, so it is a highly stressful, and I don't know, for me, I think just the fact that artists are always in a position where we are needing something, are often in a position where we need that gig, we need that support, we need the team, we need the, so it's like, how do you navigate all of these external factors that impact you as an artist and your path forward? So it's a lot for artists, and it is highly stressful. So back to the image of like, we're not going to stop the storm from passing through, but how do we anchor the boat? Right. So back to that, like, these are stress. They can be really stressful environments. So what can we do for ourselves? Well, how can we really prioritize our own needs as these environments, do create that sense of stress and everything else that you beautifully highlighted?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point of bringing it back to the boat, and how do you anchor the boat? And I think the thing with anybody who's going for the first time, um, this this conference is different from, say, a CMW or a South by Southwest, where it's less about selling and it's more about creating connections. So keeping that in the front of your mind, and making friendships and making connections, and seeing who you vibe with, and following your heart in those directions, can take a lot of stress off of you. Like, there are people certainly that you want to meet. There are shows and gigs that you want to land. There are festivals you want to play. There are routes you want to go down. Um, but I think if you go into the conference worrying less about the outcome and what happens at the end, and more about how can you be authentically yourself and be true to that, it's going to help you in the long run with your career path as a whole. And you can take this as a small percentage piece of your entire career, and not have to put so much weight on this event and this gig and this ladder rung and this ceiling and this, whatever it is. But you can kind of see it more as an overall tool in your entire career. And your career is nothing if you're not well. And so
Mhm.
how can you stay true to that in yourself? And sometimes the gig that you want might not be the right gig for who you are and what you want ultimately in your goals in your life. And the more you are honest with who you are, and the more you look in and know yourself, then you can see easily which gigs are for you and which ones are just for the money, or just for the this, or just for the whatever that doesn't actually feed your goals in the long term.
Mhm.
This kind of segues into the next session that we're going to have next week on October 11th, which is a Tuesday again. This one's happening at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, with Tara Shannon, about creating authentic connections. And we're really going to get into it about how to be authentically yourself, and tips on how to sell without selling. Because this conference, if you go in like a used car salesman. You're going to get spat out, I promise you. It's really not about selling at this conference. We all know that we're selling. We all know that everybody's there to sell something. And so we really just like kind of put that aside, and we focus more on about building the community. And for folks who have never been, we want you to be part of the community, and you have something important to share, and there's a reason why you're there. And so if we can help you next week pull out those you-nesses, like be as you as possible, that'll be the aim for next week. So it's 5 after 2. I'm happy to hang out for a couple more minutes if anybody has other questions. If you want to get a hold of Cindy, I posted her Instagram in the Body Wants to Heal, about somatic, trauma-informed yoga, lots of interesting information on there. If you want to get a hold of Cindy, can I give your email address?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so it's
Yep.
Cindy Doire, CindyDoire @gmail.com. If you have some questions, if you want to know where the wellness room is going to be, folkmusicontario.org is where you're going to find all of that information. And am I forgetting to mention anything?
No, it was great.
Okay.
I loved your segue, and one line that I take with me always in these conferences that I has helped me is to make a connection and not an impression. I think that to me is like, if and with regulating the nervous system, if you go into a room where you can just make that one connection as opposed to this big splash impression, it just takes that pressure off, and it really centers you back to that authentic connection that we all crave. And that's just as impactful as that big splash in the grand scheme of things, right?
Yeah, that's so great. Make a connection, not an impression. I really like that a lot. Big thank you, Cindy, for all of your experience, and thank you for lending your expertise to the conference itself as well. I'm excited to see you there. Shout out to Ontario Creates and the City of Ottawa for making this happen. Big thank you to Folk Music Ontario for trusting us to run these sessions on their behalf. If anyone is looking for us, you can see our Ottawa Music Industry Coalition banner. Come and see us anytime, come and hang out. Make a note of the other lovely people that are in this room, because especially these folks, are people that care about you and care about themselves. So I know for a fact that if you're having trouble, if you need to remember anything that was in one of these sessions, you can surely reach out to any of us that were on this call. So thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Kareem, for organizing this session and helping us do all of the Zoom stuff. Kareem is a program coordinator at OMIC. Thank you, Kareem. And yeah, have a great afternoon. I hope everybody feels empowered, and I hope everybody learned something about themselves. And I'm excited to see you all at the conference. And we'll see you next week, October 11th, for the next session. Ciao, everybody.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Great. We can
Yay.
stop that recording, I think.
Yep.
Perfect.